What's up guys, Zenara here, and today I'm going to go over a very spicy, fun list that you can try for the premium format. You see the thumbnail of the video and you might be thinking, what is this guy on about? This is just a fun list and it's very spicy. Depending on what we get new cards for Overdress, I think this deck can improve over time. It is not competitive, I will say that, but it is just another way to play with the new premium collection cards that we received since a couple of weeks ago. So let's just get it started. I'm going to start with the grade 3s first. We're playing for Purple Performance Ange. So in this deck, she is your main ride target. Ideally, you want to get your 2 force markers if you're going first to be able to superior call a grade 3 or any card from your deck. This is good, especially trying to pressure out your opponent. If they have a heal guard, you're able to remove a possible G Guardian in the future. And this card is just really well. It's really generic. You can put in any other Bermuda Triangle deck. It works with Heltruda, so you're able to combo off her to get more multiple attacks. So this is mainly the ideal grade 3 you want to ride into. Next, for the grade 3s, a support card for the deck is Debut Together Elvi. So Elvi is here to protect your rear guards against some denial plays or just minusing crit plays. We play cards that extend our attacks and we don't want them to be removed, so we play her, as well as some need a counter charge because this deck uses a lot of counter blasts. If you don't manage it well, you can get choked out of your plays and you won't be able to extend your attacks. So you could run this as a one-of, since it is searchable from Ange or searchable from your Stride with Shawnee's or other cards in the future, but this is just a tech card to support and protect your grade 2s and also your entire board except her, so you won't get any destructive plays during your opponent's turn. Lastly, for the grade 3s, we're playing 2 Stargaze Kazanze. So I was if you've seen any of the Twitter posts that I made, I was experimenting with this card a little bit, and this card is surprisingly okay. I was playing another card that gave you Battle Door for that specific unit's attack, since you're able to call it from Ange, and essentially if they have to heal guard, they have to discard another card for their hand. But this card hits higher numbers. It's a little bit better since it's able to hit 23 on a force marker to 33. 3 or more, it starts to hit like pretty high numbers. It doesn't trigger if you call it from hand, but it's still pretty good to call out from Ange or just from Shawnee or any other cards in the future to get that nice 23k body. Is also Ghost, which is very important for one of our grade 1s that we play in the deck. Now on to the grade 2s. We're playing 4 Top Auto Aqua. So Aqua, of course, is here to make sure that we're able to get our rear guards back, a nice early game filter, a nice pressure unit hitting 15k to your opponent or more. And in this deck, you needed to be able to pair it up with Senna to be able to search Ange, because you do not want to ride the other grade 3s. And this is just a super solid card that a lot of Bermuda Triangle decks to use. Next, our main grade 2 play that we have in the deck is for a mild sparkle Spica. So for this deck, the idea is you want to have multiple force markers on 1 or 2 circles, and then Spica to bounce back the ghost and call it back again to be able to ensure more multi attacks that are a pretty decent number. Again, she is a 9k, so if you ride her, you can get rushed out of the game. However, she's a very important extender piece for the deck to be able to swing over 33k, as well as give all of your grade 3s or whatever you call it extra 3k boost, so you can hit a force vanguard even if you don't have a grade 3 in your hand. And also she makes slightly bigger numbers, so depending on the card that you call, you can hit better numbers with Spica. She is GB1, so you have to wait until you Stride or you G-Guard to be able to use her effect. Lastly, for the grade 2s, we're playing for Dedicated Serenade Eleanor. So Eleanor is here because she is a ghost, and she also can hit 25 by herself, even though it is a Soul Blast 2, so it can't be very hefty. But in combination with Shawnee, you're able to just recall her back again. If you have enough soul in this deck, you can hit 25k twice on a force marker of 35k twice. So essentially the goal of the deck is just to multi-attack with big numbers. Eleanor is also a 10k, and that assures that if you ride her by accident, you can still defend against your opponent's force Vanguard numbers or any other decks in the future that might be able to pressure you early game. So that's why we play her as a 3 of. Playing the 4, she becomes a little bit bricky since you don't have many ways to refill soul unless you play cards that refill soul, but that's not the intention of the deck. Usually you want to try to win on your second grade 4 stride or your first one, since this is sort of an aggro deck. That is all for the grade 2s. On to the grade 1s. We are playing 4 Mermaid Idol Senna. Senna is going to be a commonplace in most of these decks. She's here to search your ideal grade 3s. She also makes a 13k booster or attacker. She's just really solid, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Especially in this deck, since you can have a booster behind Spica, it makes Spica hit better numbers. So this is like an ideal booster for Spica as well. Next, we're playing 2 Equable Career Spiana. So Spiana is here for extra counter charge. Sometimes you discard Ange's Destride, you can just return it back to your deck and shuffle. Your other grade 3s like Elvi and Kazande, you probably want to put them back into the deck if you have to recall over them, and you can just essentially keep reusing their effects as long as you can keep striding Shawnee or striding cards. As well as if you call your Heal Guardian, you can return it back and countercharge 1. Spiciest is an extra way to get that guaranteed countercharge in the deck. Next, we're playing 2 Garland Blossom Anya. Anya is here to increase our harmony count. So if you have Anya like behind the Spica and you have like 2 grade 1s in the back row, or just more cards with harmony, Shawnee is able to call out more cards, meaning you can replace your board faster and get better regards to call. So you could call Elvi, another ghost, Spica, Spiana to countercharge. There's a lot of things you could do to call with her. So Anya is here just to increase the harmony count to be able to successfully call more ghosts from your deck and call more aggressive cards from your deck. Next, like I said in my other profiles, we're playing 3 Light Elemental Hanalei. Hanale's here to make sure your opponent doesn't aggro you too much with multiple attacks. Again, the new strides from pre-collection encourage a lot of multi-attacking and push your opponent on first or second stride at ending the game. Hanalei is a way so you can secure yourself and protect yourself, and slow the opponent down without give you too much problems in your hand, since this is kind of a piece reliant deck, since you need a Spica and some other cards to be able to fully aggro your opponent. You need to be able to keep cards in your hand, so this is just another way to prevent your opponent from attacking you too much and losing a lot of cards in your hand. Lastly, for the grade 1s, we are playing 3 Joint Grasp Inersta. So this is an overdressed card. Essentially, she is like a mini frog raider, as in if your ghost is placed during your battle phase, if she's in the back row, she can stand. So this is actually pretty good with Shawnee, because if you place any ghost, she's able to restand. It doesn't have to be in the same column. So if you call a ghost and speak it to the front row, as long as you have Inersta in the back row, you can restand Inersta as a booster for Spica. So it's really good. Also, you could dump your triggers onto her and have a big Rigard swing, a Rigard booster in the back row. She also could work early game with Ange if your opponent like throws a bunch of cards. You can call her and call a ghost to restand for a booster, and there's a pretty beefy column unless they have a heal guard to survive it or a perfect guard. So Inertia is really key in order to make your columns swing bigger and to consistently not have to toss down a lot of cards to boost with. Now on to the grade zeros and triggers. We're going to talk about the Heal Guardian. The Heal Guardian is important in this deck. It's important in pretty much most builds of Premium. They allow you to survive your to stop your opponent's aggro early game. They allow you to of course G Guardian, and in this deck you use Spiana to return it back to the deck. It's just a very important card to have, and to make sure that your opponent doesn't pressure you too much in the early game, as well as negging criticals of some high powered critical attacks. Next in this deck we're playing 4 of the Draw PG Glittering Baby Lineage. So Lineage is just a basic Draw PG. If you hit it, damage, so you draw a card, and you can use it as a perfect guard for your hand. Again, Bermuda has ways that you can call this card, and then you can use it with a G Guardian to successfully guard other deck from hand or some other effects like that if you need it. Lineage is a good card in general. Next, we have 3 Aqua-like Ardel. So, Ardel is a bit more important in this deck since if you use Eleanor a couple of times, you want your soul back, and especially since Kazana uses a soul, you want to keep your soul healthy. So rewriting can help with Ange, and then if you soul blast out Ange, you can countercharge, and essentially this card just helps you fulfill that condition of keep using Eleanor's and keep using Kazana over and over again. So that's why she's also important in the deck, as well as you can boost her with Shawnee, and then after you use Shawnee's skill, you can put her into soul. So if you have more cards to call, you can do that later, or just another way to filter out your deck and then draw into a high quality piece after. Next, we have 3 Wrapping Chorus Trudy. So Trudy, of course, is a stride crit. You don't want to be able to discard your combo pieces such as like Spica, Inersta, any card. You don't want to discard that many cards in your hand. So this is just another way to stride without doing that. As well as you don't want to be striding with Anges, as then you can get more force markers and make your columns even huger. Yeah, it's just a very important card for this deck, and as well as other Bermuda Triangle decks, to keep their combo pieces in their hand. Lastly, to the last 2 triggers. The first trigger is Juror Crook. Again, in this deck, it's pretty good because you're able to bounce back Spikas, able to bounce back Inerstas, Eleanor's, and essentially get more multiple attacks on the force markers. It is at 1 because it is restricted to 1 from the Bushiroad restriction list, and it's just a very solid card to be able to, again, extend those attacks. Even though it is a 5k trigger, it's still pretty good. Lastly, we have 1 of the Overtrigger. So in this deck, if you check it early, your columns become really bigger, and especially since you have Eleanor, she'll be swinging for 35k by herself, which is pretty strong. And especially since we play strides or cards that are able to extend our multi-attacks, checking it early game essentially can increase your chances of winning the game. And yeah, it's just a really strong effect if you drive check it in this deck. And lastly, we have our starter, the V-Series starter. So when you ride upon it, if your opponent is grade 1 or greater, you can draw a card and you get a quick shield. So you want the extra soul in this deck compared to something like my Refury deck profile. And also you want to draw that card early to draw to your combo pieces and to draw into cards you want to ride into. So it's just very important to have the V series starter in this deck. Now for the type of marker in this deck, you want to be using Force 1. So you can experiment with Force 2 since there are a couple of cards that do get power, but it's not significant enough to warrant your opponent having to toss down 2 or 3 cards every single time you attack with them. Also, as well as you're able to stack them with Ange and get more force markers quicker than normal. And it's just a really good marker to have in most matchups. I've never really went to Force 2. I've always done Force 1, and it just works better in this deck since you have strides and cards that are able to use them more effectively. Now on to the strides. We are going to talk about our main win con of the deck. Dearly desired stage Shawnee. So Shawnee is important in this deck because she allows you to get back. Well, she essentially allows you to call out your combo pieces such as Spica, again the other ghost units, Inersta, and to be able to combo with them and to be able to get more attacks. So at minimum, she could get at least like 5 attacks if you call them to the front row. If you call Spica, you're able to get 6 attacks. If you call Crook, you're able to potentially get 7 attacks. And it's just a really good stride for this deck since you have a lot of cards like Inersta that checks to see if you play for Ghost. She stands, so she gets reused as a booster, and so on and so forth. And she does use a counterblast, so that's why we have a lot of counter charge in the deck. Since you're essentially going to be using like 2 CB every turn, you need ways to counter charge and to be able to extend your plays. And yeah, this is just a really good card. I've only went to her twice from hand testing and just playing the deck on CFA. I never really went to the third one, but in case if it does go that far, you do have another way to have another way to continue on with your multi-attacking. Next, we have 2 Shushu popular favorite Tira. So Tira is just another way, if you can't superior call from your deck or you're running low on deck, you can stride into this and essentially refill your deck a little bit. As well as this is just a card you would go into in an order colony matchup since you can't really superior call outside of your hand. And we do have strides that are able to call from hand, so that's not too much of a big deal. However, in this deck, it's not the main focus. It's more so of a backup stride to be able to push your opponent so you can get closer to the game. Next, we're playing 2 Ready Ocean Heltruda. So Heltruda in this deck, of course, she's a very good stride. If your opponent has enough rear guards for you to bounce back with Ange, then you can go into this. So as long as you have like a lot of open counterblast, which if you're going second, if your opponent has a bunch of rear guards, and you do have a couple of counterblasts and like a Spiana or an Elvi to demand an on-hit counter charge, you can do a lot of attacks this turn if you're using Heltruda. Especially since Ange can generate another force marker and you can superior call another card, so you can superior call a ghost, you can superior call Elvi again for another counter charge if you want. And I usually don't go into her too often depending on the deck because this deck does not get a lot of hand size. It is more so of an aggro focused deck, so if you have the opportunity to use Heltruda, you can. And it's just a fun card to be able to go into so you can accelerate your force markers and extend your attacks and plays. Next, we're running 1 perfect performance Ange. So in this deck, again, it's for the late Joker matchup as well as if you're running out of cards if your hand is like very low, your opponent has a lot of rear guards, or you have exactly 5 cards in your hand and no combo pieces, you can use this to accelerate your hand a bit and to be able to try to delay the turn try to delay the game for at least like one more extra turn if you have enough defensive pieces to survive. That's why we play Hanalei, and that's why you play other cards to be able to cycle our deck to be able to countercharge or to increase our survivability. I don't often stride into this unless I'm in a really bad position, but it's always just nice to have this card just in case. Next, we have one Progenitor Dragon of Deep Sea Ballerina. So in this deck, Ballerina can actually potentially be a very strong finishing turn. So if you have a bunch of great ones in your hand, and if you Progenitor this, and if you have Spica, Inersta, and a potential like Ghost unit, you can potentially just multi-attack 3 to 4 times if you have the right cards, and you can just disrupt their Guardians if they're like 4 or 5 damage. So as long as they don't have a PG effect, you're able to essentially pressure out their hand and essentially close the game. As well as being able to stride for free is pretty good in this deck, so you don't have to commit that many cards to stride every turn. Lastly, for the strides, we have one Zero Dragon just to see Megiddo. So in this deck, you can call a lot of cards from your drop zone to be able to have high powered attacks. So you could call your Kazane to be able to Soul Blast 1 to get 10k power. You're able to call Inersta, Eleanor's, and also Spica's, since you're able to just bounce back another card and call it in the same column. Inersta doesn't really work as well. I think Inersta could work well in this deck. I just never really used the opportunity, but the theory is you can like bounce back a ghost, call it back. She's in the back row, so she stands, attack with Kazan, a ghost, and then you can swap their positions to attack again. So that might be able to work if Inersta's in the back row and you swap positions. So it's a pretty sufficient ending game turn, as well as this card is just in case your opponent has pushed you to the brink and you can't really think of anything else to close the game, so you have a last ditch effort to close the game. So that's why you only play one of Megiddo. Now on to the G Guardians. We have 2 High Society Citron. Citron is here to be a 25k shield. To call Hanalei during your opponent's battle phase, it's a very strong play to be able to force them to use a counterblast for their attacks, and them to always keep in mind that you always have Hanalei or a play that you're able to disrupt your opponent. You can also call Aqua from your hand to bounce back Inersta or a card beyond the Vanguard, since if you stride Shawnee, you have a grade 1 booster behind it, or a card behind the Vanguard. Shawnee will not be a Harmony, so you can't get your minimum of calling 2. And yeah, it's just very important to be able to have this option to be able to call Hanalei or other cards during your opponent's battle phase. Next we play one hand-in-hand Leona. Leona's here to bounce back any important rear guards you may need, so you can bounce back your Spikas, Inersta, they target the back row, and to be able to get extra shield out of it. So if you call a Senna from bounce a Senna from Leona's skill, you're able to call her to guard circle, essentially get 30k shield. If you bounce a card, you have to call a card for your hand, so it's mandatory, and this is a nice card to get stuff back. The next card we have is Blessed Sparkle Sandy. So for Sandy, she's also just another way to get bigger shield. There are sometimes you can have a lot of cards in your hand just thanks to the draw triggers and bouncing cards from Ange or whatnot. Essentially, if you have a card face up your G zone, you can have a lot of shield depending on how many cards in your hand. 5k for every 2 that you counterblast 1 to get an extra 5k. So the counterblast can be a little bit painful, but then again, that's where we're running counter charges in the deck to be able to combat that counterblast issue. So only run one, just because it doesn't come up too often. And yeah. Lastly, for the G guards, we have 2 Diva Salvation Larus. Larus is the new G-Guard that Bermuda got. In this deck, it's pretty good because your hand is not that big. You don't have a lot of shield. And especially you have a way to keep reusing Spiana. You could just return Spiana to your hand. And Counterboss 1, next turn, you're able to put back any grade 3 for a cost and countercharge. Simply replacing the cost 4 Lurus, as well as Elvi as a deck for be an on-hit countercharge. So if you give a crit to a rear guard and Elvi's on the field, your opponent will most likely take the 1 damage from Elvi rather than the 2 crit, depending if you're controlling the game far enough or manage your counterblast and resources well. Larus is just good to be able to get that 30k shield or extra 5k defensive buff to your Vanguard. So yeah, Larus is a really good card as long as you return a normal unit, which is part of the cost. And that is all for my spicy Ghost Ange premium deck profile. So in the future, I hope there are more ways that I can call ghosts other than from hand, or there's cards that allow me to call ghosts other than from hand. I was thinking about trying to build a Felty Rosa version with the new triple art, but I think Ange is just a little bit better since she has a force marker, and she doesn't need so many requirements to fulfill her abilities and more pieces. So this deck is really fun. I want to keep testing it, keep experimenting with the different ghost cards that we have. I just think that this list is pretty okay for right now. And I originally got inspired from a video, which I will link down in the description later, that had essentially Ingrid's, Eleanor's, Spica's, and I tried out this out. It was really fun for a bit before Premium Collection came out. So I wanted to expand the deck and dive deep more into this kind of Ghost Ange variant. So if you guys like the video, make sure to like and subscribe and comment and hit the notification bell if you want to see more of my premium deck profiles. And I'll be doing some more deck profiles in the future of different cards, as long as I'm able to make a pretty decent list to share out to you guys. So if you enjoyed the video, I'm Zenarion, and I'm signing off.